Let's do 47 seconds. Quick.
That clap is more shots than Ben Simmons took in 6 fourth quarter games.
Wow.
Miserable. Embarrassing. And like, is this because this has been a thing with him in the past.
Did not understand. I didn't understand that he refuses to switch hands. I didn't realize that was also. I've been reading a lot of Ben Simmons this morning. That Ben Simmons, he's a terrible shooter, which sometimes that is. Sometimes Draymond Green also an incredible player, can't really shoot for shit.
Hold on,
Watch him.
He doesn't take enough shots for us to even know.
That's
at this
the
point.
problem.
Like he was a poor shooter.
But also, it's the fact that his dad taught him to shoot left-handed, but he's naturally right-handed, and he's worked with trainers that are like, hey, be good? Just throw that shit out and just start shooting right-handed. And he's like, Who can say?
Wow.
This is the really frustrating thing with just the entire discourse around this team.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, there's been partisans who are still who like Ben Simmons. They're like, he's an enormously talented player, which he is. But it's like, it's not that he doesn't shoot. Like, people were comparing him to, was it Westbrook? But like, he does so many things besides being a field goal shooter, that it's kind of unfair to just hold that one thing against him.
Right.
But it's not that he doesn't generate a lot of points. Like, I didn't realize it had gotten this bad until I watched the series, where it's like, he will not take the most open shots.
Yeah.
Like, that pass under the net instead of taking the layup was astonishing. There is no...
And it wasn't a fluke. That wasn't like a one-off. That's how he plays the game.
Well, and I didn't understand. I wasn't watching that game close enough, but that his free throws were so off that the reason he didn't take it was because they were going to hack him on purpose, knowing that he'd go to the free throw line and just fucking brick every single one of those. What a strange player.
It's very weird.
To be so enormously talented, like still be an all-star, but also like stat Twitter accounts are just dunking on you because it's impossible. Every stat is tremendous.
Well, the thing I was not following. I don't follow the Sixers despite being from the Philly area because I grew up as a Bulls fan.
You spare yourself this one bit of pain.
Oh yeah, this is the one. This is the one I get to not feel bad about. I mean, I gave up on baseball also at some point, so it doesn't. But the Phillies are my team. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm going to. I still have that in me. It's just suppressed in a way that the Eagles are not. But I've never been a Sixers fan. Rooted for individual Sixers players. I thought, Allen Iverson was an incredible phenom, so I loved watching him play, but I wasn't a fan of the Sixers. But so the last time I really checked in was when, or not checked in, but the last time that the Sixers, obviously we talked about the trust the process era, and I'd paid attention during that. But with Simmons specifically, he didn't float up for me until the Guangdong Tigers thing happened, where he had gone so long without being willing to shoot a 3-pointer and without making a 3-pointer that when he finally did in this fucking exhibition game against this Chinese team, the entire bench blew up in excitement and was just like, that's where he's at this point.
That was a couple years ago, right?
Fucking rookie of the year, Ben Simmons. Yes. It was not this. Yes, it was a bit ago.
I remember that though.
But I remember being like, okay, cool. I remember that. I had heard Ben Simmons' name again. I knew he'd won rookie of the year that year, but I did not know it was as bad as all that. And then so to come into this playoffs and immediately be like, oh, he's still that dude. He's still that dude who won't take a shot. Are you kidding me? How'd they get to the playoffs?
I remember for me, it was like, okay, he doesn't shoot threes. And increasingly to make an NBA offense work, everyone has to at least have some sort of credible, they will put up a three. So you don't want to leave them too open. And the rap on him was he wasn't doing that. I was like, okay, but surely, that's, you can work for as many talents as he has, you can work around that.
Yes.
The fact that he won't even go for layups or close field goals I was astonished. I've never seen it. And I feel bad for him because it's the narrative turned on him over the course of this series where everyone finally saw what was actually happening there and was like, oh, this guy needs to be shot out of a cannon. And like clearly this is sort of a mental game issue, but also it's been building for years and it's just gotten worse. And so I do get like people are like, he needs to get out of Philly. And it's like, where's he gonna go? Yeah. Like he's gonna infuriate anyone that he works with if he's not taking the most open shots that a defensive player can get.
Yeah, totally.
And he's expensive.
I have to imagine that price tag starts to come down, though, right? You don't think
I don't know what I think his
possible?
Contract is kind of locked in, though. Like I think he's got like 3
so
more.
To inherit that.
Yeah, I think he's got like.
I don't know enough about basketball contracts to know what the loopholes are on those.
Anyway, some fun series in the last couple of weeks. Okay, let's do a video game podcast.
All right.
What's good, Internet? It is Tuesday, June 22nd, and you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 404. I'm your host, Austin Walker. I'm joined by Patrick Klepek.
Cado, just don't even edit it. Just cold open into that, and then just let Austin train. Okay, good.
That's professionalism, what you just heard. Patrick Klepek, Ricardo Contreras, Rob Zachney here. We didn't even talk about the true heartbreak on the NBA courts this past week. It's fine. We're going to keep moving. We're just not going to pay it. We're just not going to.
Katie's legs.
We're not going to talk about we're not going to talk about. Yeah, Katie. Yeah, exactly. Katie's feet. Katie wearing
his big ass foot.
Wearing a shoe size too big.
Oh my God! What? That is
you knew about this, right?
No, this is one of many tidbits that came out after the Nets loss that he is. KD, come on the pod. You are through online.
He's already got a podcast, doesn't he?
I feel like KD, because he has poster sickness, because he's like online in the way
I feel like we could have a conversation with him. Yes. And he is broken. He is one of my favorite players to watch. Like he is truly a delight in all senses of the word. And KD, come on the pod. You're listening somewhere. Yeah,
he wears I think he's a size 17, but he wears a size 18.
Why?
Which is
in part
extra
I think
toe room.
Well, part of it came up because people are asking, your shoes keep kind of coming off or coming loose. Seems like a shoe size issue that as an all-time great, probably could have gotten remedied. And he's like, nah, like it gives him wiggle room, and so he just deals with that part of it.
Does he need wide shoes and he doesn't know it?
I think he just likes. I think he likes the feeling of like slippers on his feet. I don't know.
I think he did use that, and I think slippers was the analogy that he used. And at some level, maybe because he is such a tremendously just big weird energy is always radiating off of him.
Yes.
Like some of those sort of tics are a little more common in like a baseball player. And I feel like that is a little bit of. I'm sure basketball players have them of only wearing XYZ or doing X, Y, and Z for a big game or something. But I feel like KD does it for all the time. And if that's what he's telling us, what's he not telling us?
Also, he's physically singular, and like it's not just that he has a skill set that doesn't generally go with dudes with that build. So like maybe he's discovered like, hey, for a guy like me, this feels right in a way like lacing up tight just does not
work.
As long as he can turn those corners and like stop on a dime and like pull up. Yeah. I mean, who's to argue?
Exactly.
As long as the Slender Man can make his shots.
I should also just say briefly, like I'm happy for the Bucks. The Bucks, Milwaukee is a small market, and I know
they've been scrappy for a couple years now. I'm happy.
That's spoken like someone who has not ever been adjacent to Wisconsin sports.
Okay, but I don't have it. Has it? Okay, when I think of Chicago
lived there for 7 years. I grew up around Chicago.
Were we sitting around aggravated at the Bucks all that often? I think you're having Packers spill over onto the basketball.
Oh no, it's not even Packers, dude. Like it is Wisconsin sports are convinced like they are the best fans in the world.
Well, I believe that. Okay, sure. I'm with you.
Isn't that fans?
Jesus.
What fans don't believe that?
No. But it is. But the thing is, they have so much to choose from. Like, so it is this like they're all on board. they stand the Badgers. They're all in on the Brewers. Oh, the Brewers are incredible. Miller Park, just a sacred space. The Packers.
You
of
live
course,
in
the greatest
Boston,
team.
Rob. You can't do this from Boston because this is also everyone I've ever met from Boston.
Yeah, they're both not. Yeah, but the thing is, you would never say, I feel happy for Boston fans. No,
I wouldn't.
Celtics, it's a small market team. Boston's so tiny. Just the smallest little bean.
It's not, though. The Milwaukee is much smaller. What's the last time the Bucks had the championship? When? 60s? 70s?
Sure, I believe that.
The Celtics have been good in our lifetimes.
Like recently.
Yeah, but they deserve it.
Wow.
I'm incredible. Incredible.
We're talking about Ben Simmons, not Bill Simmons, please.
Yeah. God.
Speaking of deserving it.
Oh my. All right. How y'all doing? Besides,
properly alienated 3/4 of our audience.
Yes, exactly.
15 minutes.
Exactly. Listen, I'm supposed to be the elitist New Yorker over here. The market. I'm supposed to be like, I love New York. I love the Yankees. I love bodegas. Nowhere else in the world is like this. That's what people expect from me. I can't even bring out what
look
Rob
at
is.
this. Look at this great primary. People are psyched about
People
politics
love
in New York.
the Bears. Oh my god,
Hey,
dude,
what
it
happened?
sucks.
So,
are we recording Waypoint After Dark?
Two of the mayors are Voltron.
There's Cado, log off. Like I think we transitioned to an after dark. We'll get back to you in an hour.
You guys know what was going on in the mayoral race?
Yeah, because there's a Voltron
here?
situation, right? Like a shit Voltron.
Is there like a Biden play happening where people are kind of throwing in the
at this point it's happening in a couple of different places in a couple of different ways. I believe Catherine Garcia is now campaigning alongside Andrew Yang, which is weird. But like whatever, I don't give a fuck about Catherine Garcia, so whatever. I mean, the thing to know is that like the person who's probably going to win the Democratic primary. I guess we'll see. We'll see how much ranked choice voting actually matters. But Adams is the person who I think would win without ranked choice voting.
The cop.
The cop. Yes, yeah. The cop who did that video. Did you see the video of him? Like,
I saw people talking about the video. There's so much. I know too many people in New York that eventually I had to like tune down the mayoral discourse and just stopped clicking on things.
You muted Slaybad on Twitter.
Right. So Adams, there's two videos that people talk about with Adams. The first is the one from years ago when he's teaching parents how to look through all their kids' shit to see if they have contraband on them, and it's like you have to run your own house as if it's fucked up, man. It's fucked up. It's real bad. Like go through their backpacks, check inside of their stuffed animals. You never know where a gun might be.
Oh my god!
It's really
and
bad.
If all else fails, plant something. Look, they need a lecture. You gotta scare them straight.
So then you have the kind of trio of sort of progressive candidates. And I say sort of because each of them have
part of the problem, right? It's been
issues.
hard for people to rally behind a singular. Everyone is like flawed in a different way, and so you have
at
people
this
kind of like
point,
flanking out.
I would say Maya Wiley is my number one, but that's not where I was 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And she didn't get there by becoming better. She got there because my other number one fucked up bad, and my number two was revealed to have. So my previous
is that the one who fucked up the union thing?
That was Diane Morales, yeah.
Yep.
Who basically said, I support real unions, not. This one has its issues. I'm not going to let my own people unionize. I'm not going to recognize their attempt to unionize my own staff. And also, like that had already. And Cado, I don't know if you, as someone who's also paying attention to this stuff, if this hit for you too, but that fed into my like lingering concerns with her anyway, that like she came out of like the boardroom more than the street. Yeah. You know what I mean? She had gone through like a much more business focused life in a way that
it's kind of a weird thing to
skeptical.
say, but like there was something too clean about the like way the message was being conveyed, even where like you would get inklings of that sort of like different background. But then like once the union stuff broke, it was absolutely like, oh yeah, right, this is who you are.
Oh, here it is. Here
it
you
is.
are. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, I'm not saying the stuff that she did previously was evil or anything like that. Like, I think she was doing NPO stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know enough about what those roles were, but like I do know that she came out of being, you know, an executive director or whatever, you know, and at that point I'm like, okay. The second person who was in that kind of progressive trio of folks was Stringer, Scott Stringer, who had this like technocrat background because he used to be like the comptroller, or is he even currently the comptroller?
Maybe.
But unfortunately, we had a sexual misconduct claim made about him last month, 2 months ago now. I don't recall when I was like, well, he ain't making the rank anymore. But at this point, because it was April, I just looked it up. April was when the sexual misconduct allegation came in. But it was about something that happened in 2001. I think he basically, I don't even know if he apologized. I don't know if he even addressed it. I think he just kind of let it hang. And then the third person here is Maya Wiley, who is fine. Does not come out of the left necessarily, but does have, I would put her in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party because of her work, and her work in issues of structural racism and stuff like that. But like, it is what it is. And so I'm probably going to rank Wiley first, and then we'll see what the rest of that list looks like. But it sucks. It's like, I want to be excited about ranked voting. I want to actually be like, and here's my number 2, and here's my number 3. And instead it's like, it's a Democratic primary still? Okay, I'm still choosing. 2. Yeah, exactly.
Just rank enough you don't rank Yang somehow.
Exactly. You don't have to. You don't have to rank. You don't have to rank 5. You can choose not to rank everybody. Also, there's more than 5.
They were trying to get people to rank Yang 5 as like part of his campaign, which is fucking hilarious. Yeah, it's just like, just put him on there just in case, just to stop Eric Adams from happening. Just like the weirdest fucking play.
I don't want
they're
Yang
desperate.
either.
No, exactly. This is what I'm saying. But like,
anyway,
they thought people who didn't want Eric Adams would not want Eric Adams enough to want to be like okay with Yang as
to prefer Yang. No, they're just different poisons. Anyway, that's the New York podcast, the New York Politics Minute. It ain't good.
Oh, but your point about New York sports, though, I think the other thing that your period of grace is ending, though. The Knicks are starting to claw back to relevance.
Yeah,
and so while I still feel confident that we can rely on the Jets and Giants to just be like moot points, like just showing up week after week and just like sucking up airwaves in the New York area. I do feel like you might unfortunately have like New York pride in sports again in the near future.
Yeah, How are the Mets doing? I don't follow baseball close enough. Mets okay these days?
They almost swept the Cubs in the past week. They're actually pretty good. The Mets are good.
Okay, well then yeah, I think if you're in a market that has like multiple decent teams in any one sport, you're in trouble. And both of the New York basketball teams made the playoffs this year, so I think that's trouble. That's people are gonna hate you. This is part of why I floated after being a Bulls fan. Like even after I moved to New York and like lived around New York, during college and then moved here after college, it was like, am I gonna become a fucking New York sports fan? Like, is that I'm gonna just try to adopt a team? Ugh.
No, it can't be done. Like, I cannot imagine having an emotional connection to the Giants. I can't do it.
I'll never like the Giants.
You have to be born into it. But people say that about the Bears. I frequent time in Wisconsin, and it's not even like obnoxious Packers fans. It's mostly just people being like, "That's a curse." I'm like, yeah, you're right. You wouldn't have picked. You don't pick. The Bears. Like you're just here.
Right.
We're all to hold hands and double doink it.
I am grateful for the Bears though, because I feel like they prepared me for a lifetime of Democratic politics, where like you had Jim McMahon like 30 years ago saying that like at one point one of the McCaskies like told him, like Jim McMahon used to be a Bears quarterback and was like, hey, this team's going to hell. And like, here's what you need to do to like remain competitive, right? Like our window's closing. We need to get serious about this. And he sort of gives his pitch. And I think this might have been, was it Ed McCaskey?
I don't know.
Yeah. He says, the thing you don't get is that these people will show up no matter what. Like team's good, team's bad. We make money either way. So we don't really need to like put in that effort to field a good team. The loyalty of these fans is such that the business model is just being here and being the Bears. And so McMahon was like, that's it. Like, get ready. Like, Chicago will only ever have good teams by accident because fundamentally the model is that where else are you going to go?
Vote blue no matter who, baby.
Yeah. This is for vote orange and blue, especially if you want to move the stadium to the suburbs and are going to absolutely need some sort of taxpayer buy-in.
You think it's going to happen? That's going to, I saw that they
said
they're interested.
Yeah, there is a non-insignificant chance that the Rob could fly out in 5 years to hang out with me, and we could. It's a longish walk, but you could do it. It's not that bad to go to.
So a normal walk for Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I didn't.
How many squares away would this dog track be?
I would so Rob, it's not that far. It's kind of just down the way, and he'd be like, "That's the perfect distance. That is the Rob distance." He'd put on his satchel, and we'd be on our way. I think I mean, all those stadiums are trending in that direction, but like the finances in Illinois are in such dire straits that it's hard for me to imagine how they would ask for like $500 million from taxpayers for it. Right. So I just don't know. And then the McCaskies, who own the Bears, and they're rich, but not that kind of rich. They can't they can't self-finance a stadium. They'd have to get money from the league and
the Bears are their capital, basically.
That's it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so they want to. What they should do is sell it to like a bigger rich person who could just make that happen. I just don't know how.
What if instead of selling it to a bigger rich person, they sold it like if there were shares. But like public shares
shut the fuck up.
For the people.
Every time I have to hear from some fucking Packers fan that says, I'm an owner. And I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You get the fancy paper. No, you're not. Anyway, let's.
Okay, but what if you could be?
I'd buy it in a heartbeat.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
I want the fancy paper.
That's my fancy paper. Anyone playing anything? Anyone talk about video games? This is what happens is we did E3 and now we're just gamed out and we're like, oh, we gotta talk about
We also had a really busy weekend of watching them sports.
Yeah.
There was so much good basketball. But I did play a game.
What'd you play?
I started to play a game.
Oh.
I edited a review of a game by Cameron.
I see. Yes.
And then I was like, this game sounds pretty good. And then I started getting rocked at it. So now like after we record, I'm gonna have to go back and try to figure out like how to handle this whole thing. So I started playing Roguebook.
Roguebook.
Which is the new game from Richard Garfield.
Word?
Yes. Yeah. So Artifact is gone. Forget about Artifact. Wipe it from your mind. Oh, he made another game in between then and now, too.
He made an actual card game for Fantasy Flight.
Right, it was a print
Keyforge.
Yeah.
Keyforge.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a... stop me if you've heard it before. It is a roguelike deck builder.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Patrick.
However...
Patrick just fell asleep in his chair.
Yeah.
Y'all should read Cameron's review because Cam's really read up on this stuff. But Cam's pitch for this game, and it does appear to work this way, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so like Slay the Spire we're all familiar with, and that's about like paring down your deck really ruthlessly to like control probability so that your strategy just runs like a Swiss watch, right? It just every turn you are executing to your strategy and being able to respond to whatever the game is throwing at you. So like you need just enough flexibility to survive a run and Slay the Spire, and then just enough rigidity to always like be playing the combos you want and doing your strategy. Roguebook is basically a deck builder where your deck just keeps building. Like it is a process of accretion. And so the thing that Roguebook kind of solves is that there can be a point where in Slay the Spire, it almost feels like you're on autopilot, where like a turn comes up and you've seen this exact array of cards like 3 times in this run before. You know exactly what to do. Your job is basically just to push the buttons and make the strategy spin. Because this is a game where most of the time you are just getting more cards for your deck, you end up with a lot of hands where you need to like stop and be like, shit, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Now, the trade-off is that's going to slow down play. It's definitely not like, you're not going to have that like weird, almost like, you know how like Slay the Spire, sometimes you feel like you're in a casino and you're just like, hit me.
Yes. Yeah. Got it. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
There are so many times where like you are just like complete record scratch moment where like you got a bunch of enemies queuing up a monstrous series of attacks.
Right.
And you have a boatload of cards in your hand that you're like, there's not even a through line to them. There's not a logic. You just gotta kind of figure out like, okay, how do I make this bag of random crap responsive to the thing that is happening?
It's so interesting because in some ways there's an interview or there's a promotional clip with Richard Garfield talking about this, in which he says that it is a fat deck design, which is to contrast it with what you normally do in these games, which is by the time you get to the mid game, you understand what type of deck you're building. You start one of these games. If you've never played one of these games before, the way that a deck builder works. When we say deck builder, we're talking about this style of game where you start with some very basic cards, and through the course of play, you build a deck by gaining cards after victories or after, each encounter, and you start to piece together a thing. Normally you have a choice of like 3 cards after each win, and you go like, okay, well, let's take this poison card. And then at that point going forward, you're starting to think about, okay, I'm going to build a poison deck. I'm going to take things that give me poison, or things that do bonus things when damage over time hits, or whatever. And by the time you get to the mid game, you know what type of deck you built, and you have these like hangers on, starting cards you got when you weren't sure yet that you were going to make a poison deck. You thought you were going to make a combo deck, or you thought you were going to make a big single hit strong strike deck. And so you tend to start taking these options where instead of getting cards, or instead of spending resources for new tools, you spend resources to get rid of cards and thin that deck back down so that it's way more consistent, so that you're not pulling the combo, breaker card when what you really need is the apply poison card. And so the pitch that Garfield makes is, I wanted it to be that you always had a big hand of cards that just did weird shit, and that was viable, that the game was built around that.
Right.
And that feeling, instead of it being, like you said, Rob, the kind of machine, building this machine, this just boom, 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 like just keeps hitting as efficiently as possible.
And to be clear, I don't think like the machine is not a problem. There's a reason we all love Slay the Spire. Like that act of like
it's fun.
Sculpting a deck is really rewarding and exciting, and like seeing new ways to build decks. That's all to the good. But it also became such a strong model that there's a lot of games now that operate according to very similar logic, as well as there's a lot of rogue inspired games that also are inspired by really tight like model of play where like your decisions have to be optimal and efficient at every turn. Roguebook feels a little bit looser, a little like there's a little more space for creativity, but I will say like, based on just like an hour or so with the game, it's also pretty brutal because the thing is, the meta layer, the space in between the battles is completely different from like Slay the Spire. If you pull up screenshots of this game, what you will see is an overworld map that's a hex grid. It's very colorful, very bright. I would say this is a game that looks so much better in motion than in screenshots. I think in screenshots, the art style looks very generic, faintly Blizzard inspired. Lots of like bright primary colors, but it just looks something about it in a still frame looks kind of chintzy and uninspired to me.
Yep. And I was like, is this for Android or for iOS? When I saw these screenshots the first time, right?
Right. In motion, much more charming. It looks good, it sounds good. But if like in the pictures, the overworld map with this hex grid map, big parts of it are not filled in, and that's because the conceit of this game is that you are literally trapped within a grimoire-like book, a rogue book, if you will, and you have to fill in the pages using your brush, and you use the ink of the book against it to reveal more of the landscape. Your brush has 5 charges when you enter like a chapter, and by default, it will reveal all hexes within 2 spaces of you. So like you'll fill in an area around you. All the stuff you need is on this map, but you have to sort of build visible pathways to get there. And so there will be like towers that fill in a radius of 3. If you can get to a tower, you will automatically fill in a radius of 3 around that tower. You also get different inks that will like create, really the most common one you'll find is it will illuminate. It will shade in 3 spaces in a line in front of you. And so you can sort of like build a little spindle of revealed map, go out there, use your brush, and now you've just uncovered a huge swath of the map. And that will uncover things like places you can buy cards. There's lots of little like loot boxes all around the map where you pay 25 gold and you get a pick of 3 cards. There's a lot of random battles, but instead of giving you cards, most of them will give you like the special inks that you can use to explore more of the map. And so there's this tension between, you always know basically how to get to the exit of the chapter, but you also know that guarding the gate is a boss. So there's like, there are boss encounters on the map that you can see. And then there's a bigger boss guarding the gate that like will allow you to move to the next chapter. To me, the difficulty feels pretty spiky between those two. Like you have your regular encounter, and those can break bad surprisingly often just because of some weird shit you'll encounter. You got your regular boss battles, and then you got your chapter boss, which is just going to be a real, a real check against what you've done. So, on the one hand, you do know you need to go around this map and arm up. You need to get more items for your heroes. You need to get more cards for them to just be able to unload a lot of damage or bring up a lot of defense real quickly. Because your basic kit will not give you anywhere near what you need to handle these elite encounters. But on the other hand, revealing more of that map and like exploring it and fighting these regular encounters, all of that drains your resources. And so there's that sort of tension between like, do I try to mount an expedition out to this like sight tower in the hope that I'll find like piles of gold on the ground and some health charges and some new encounters that will give me new stuff? Or do I basically cut my losses here, go to the boss and see if I can get this done with what I've got while I've still got like pretty full health? And I haven't sort of been whittled down by the exploration. So that's the other dynamic in all this, is that it's like you can always sort of short circuit the level and be like, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to take my deck. I'm going to go to the exit of the level and get out of here as quickly as possible. But you have a lot of reasons to stay and try to see more and do more. And that will like allow you to build out your deck. But that deck will become more and more chaotic. That's not to say there's not any sculpting, by the way. There are a lot of cards that have a dissolve effect. And so what that will do is it's like exhausting a card in Slay the Spire. It's not gone from the deck, but it will eliminate a card from the deck from the battle. So there is a bit of sculpting you can still do if you like emphasize like cards with dissolve effects, where you can show up in a battle and be like, depending on what you're seeing, you can start dissolving the cards you don't want for this encounter because they don't really fit what you're facing.
Interesting. Okay.
So it still has a bit of that sculpting thing because that's fun, but it's not the entire game. Right. And yeah, dude, like it is.
Yeah, I played a demo of it like 6 months ago. It was like, there could be something here. I couldn't see the design in this way. For me, the thing that I remember thinking was how distinct it was from basically all the other deck builders I've played in the last 2 years, like since Slay the Spire, but even along with Slay the Spire was like the early builds of Griftlands at the time, which now was out, by the way, and is like pretty good on Switch. I still prefer to play it on PC. I still prefer mouse keyboard for it, but but the big difference between all of those games and this, Monster Train does this too, is those games are all node-based exploration, where you're like, all right, do I want to go in the left path or the right path down this map? Even Griftlands, which gives you the sense of openness in a different way, which I'd love to revisit it more deeply and have a larger conversation about it at some point. But even there, you're still basically going down one of those node maps. It's just been pretty well hidden or pretty well modified to not be especially the actual straightforwardness of it has been obfuscated. And so to come to this, where there's a big map and you're like going around uncovering tiles and finding surprises and building out just more and more, a broader and broader bag of tools, feels more roguish to me, to where maybe that earns that part of the name. Because in many ways, the least roguelikey thing about the Slay the Spire model is the exploration. Like, there isn't really exploration. You're pulling encounters out of a hat. You're not learning a space. You don't have that sense of exploration, really. And I think that abstraction works very well for Slay the Spire and for Griftlands and for Monster Train and all that. But I think the idea of like looking at a map and being like, okay, I'm going to go over there, or seeing what's around a corner, seeing what's revealed when you flip a bunch of tiles over, is much more like the joy you get out of a roguelike, of a traditional roguelike. So I'm glad to hear that. And also it's interesting how that is also in many ways aligned with the quote unquote fat deck like design, where like it's not maximalist necessarily. I still think this game is like pretty, from the little bit I played of it months ago, like that part of the game is not overwhelming. It's not like it's a huge open world RPG or something like that, right? It's still a fairly constrained map compared to Baldur's Gate or something, right? It's not doing that, to be clear. But there is still something in that idea of spreading out from that like 3 node map to here's a bunch of hexes you can explore, that feels in line with that same core thesis of what the game should feel like, which is nice.
It reminds me of Trials of Fire.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Although this almost feels more exploratory because you're uncovering bits of the map that way. And do you have a marker? Because like in Trials of Fire, you have that arrow. It's like your next objective is in this direction, so you can kind of
some things are illuminated. That you know where they are. The exit's always illuminated. But yeah, it's I would say like the difference is Trials of Fire to me feels much more like you were trying to manage an expedition and like husband your resources as you go from like point A to point B.
Right.
I think the emphasis, you're right. This is a little bit more about exploration from the standpoint of like just creating space to be explored, discovering what new areas there are to be explored. Whereas Trials of Fire, at least the last time I played it, felt a little bit more of trying to figure out how you should get from point A to point B, while picking up enough resources and not getting too depleted. It's a subtle distinction. Maybe not even a real distinction at all. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But to me, it feels a little bit more like the because you're limited by the number of charges on your brush and the inks you have. Like exploration, the game hard caps you. Like you get to do X amount of exploration, and then we're not going to let you do it anymore. Whereas Trials of Fire, like you can always keep walking. Not a good idea, but you can keep walking.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious if Trials of Fire ended up biting some of what this game would do to me, because I fell so hard into that this year, where like that openness, that sense of build and progression was hit so well for me by Trials of Fire. Like truly maybe my favorite game I played this year still, in if I'm being like fully honest with myself in that way. I mean, it's only June, so what are you going to do? It's like, it's that or Operation Tango, or was there a big, I haven't played Ratchet yet. Is there like a big game I'm forgetting about that came out this year that I played and liked? Monster Hunter. Yeah, I like Trials of Fire more than Resident Evil 8.
Yeah. For me, I'm still like my big games came out at the very end of last year before I really processed them. Like Suzerain's still really high on my like, damn, that's one of the best games released in the last. And then Art of Rally is just charming.
Nier Replicant is probably the big one, but like that's an old game remade. But that's the one. That's probably the one that I threw myself that like hit me like that the right way. So, anyway, yeah, I'm gonna check out Roguebook. I updated it while you were talking, Rob. So that's exciting. We should take a break and come back and talk about some other stuff. We all played some other stuff, so BRB. All right, we are back. I have another game that is like a roguelike-y exploration thing, but I'm going to save that so that Patrick can talk on this podcast until a little bit later. We should talk about Strangers in Paradise. Stranger of Paradise. Stranger of Paradise. Phantom of Paradise.
Don't look it up. We're just going to have to.
Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origins, Team Ninja. We played the demo. We all individually played that demo.
Yeah.
That I was so low on that after seeing the trailer that like there was only room to go up, and I came up on it a little bit.
Yeah.
I still think all the stuff I didn't like about the trailer, the grayness, the like edgelord enemy vibe, like, all of the stuff around like I'm gonna rip this thing open.
Everything that appears related to Nomura, it remains stuff I don't seem to like. You know, again, games are a team, but a story about an angry man, the costumes, like all the sort of, I could take it or leave it. You could all throw it out, come back with a completely new look.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's like nowhere to go.
It's so easy to imagine a different look that like takes not more seriously, but that leans charming instead of leans like grim, that I would like more. Like imagine if this game looked like Final Fantasy IX in terms of its like retro aesthetic. It's not retro aesthetic, but it's like treating the traditional Final Fantasy, enemy designs, locations with that style of like paintbrush. Which is,
I think, kind of why this like when this originally, like the premise, like a broad stroke kind of leaked out of like, oh, sounds like, the team behind Neo or Ninja Gaiden is going to work with Square on a kind of actiony, soulsy, like Final Fantasy 1 set games. Like, ooh, like that. All right. Like that could go in some really like interesting directions. And then seeing that Mimi trailer and the chaos bullshit and just everything about it was like, oh, like there were like 9,000 paths in front of you and you like took the most distasteful one. So I was also in a place where there was nowhere to go but up. And I don't know that I came out of playing that demo going, God damn, cannot wait for more Stranger in Paradise. But it was like, there's some interesting ideas here. And I would be curious to come back.
Than Neo, which means I probably won't end up.
And probably won't be as long as Neo, which is also one of the reasons.
You're right. Yeah.
Like truthfully, I look at, I played a decent chunk of the original Neo, liked it. I think then like a Polygon review came out and was like, this took me 85 hours to finish. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I enjoyed my time with Neo and and then when Neo 2 was, what if Neo, but just like more of it. I'm like, oh no, like good for Neo fans, but I can't be you.
Yeah.
So
I really liked what I played of Neo 2 and mostly found that you've seen me play Souls games. I just don't get particularly frustrated at deaths. And we talked about this at the time. I think Cado was right to identify that one of the things is that it's attacking burns your own stamina, or is it what is the thing that it does that Souls doesn't do? Now I'm forgetting, but it's something around stamina consumption. Specifically made me feel like I was getting in a hole when combat would break bad.
Right.
And I was like, well, what the fuck was I supposed to do there? And that feeling is like is not one that comes up with me in video games very often at all. So I was like, I don't like being in this mode where I'm that frustrated. And like when I play Bloodborne, a game that I'm, have other issues with, I still don't get frustrated in that way. So I ended up bouncing off of it. I didn't get that frustration at all from this, even though I was getting my ass kicked by Garland at the end of that demo. I also got my ass kicked voluntarily a number of times in that demo. There's that bit where you're supposed to go outside along they're like, oh no, there's all these enemies in front of you. There's too many of them to fight. Go around. What if I just try to fight them? What if I just beat them anyway?
What if I just block all these fire attacks?
What if I just block all these fire attacks?
Exactly. Watch them blow up. Which is like that is the right like the mechanic that I think is interesting, and if expanded on, correctly, it could be like a unique. And I guess that is what I like about this Neo team is they try and they take this base idea and then find interesting mechanics to layer in it. Whether this one in this game will, be interesting enough to, hold up over the course of, 20, 30 hours or whatever. I don't know. But for people who haven't played it, basically, like you have a parry that is attached to your weapon. So if like an enemy attacks you, you can hit like the, L1 and like block. And then like you can just like go in for an easy attack. But then there's also this like, what's it called? Like the soul shield. Right. Yeah. And that's attached to circle. And that can have a couple of different uses. Also, the soul circle, it like builds up your MP over time, right?
Yeah, it makes your MP, your max MP bigger. Yes. When you
and that also is you lose chunks of your max MP as you're dying. So like this is kind of like critical if you're fighting like a boss fight, like Garland, which we can get to, because that's kind of where the combat like kind of comes to a real point and forces you to really engage with all its mechanics. But anyway, like the first time this really comes into play is, for example, you see like these traditional like fire enemies from Final Fantasy. And they're shooting these fireballs at you, and you can like block and just like do a little damage. You can run around and go attack them, and like they get bigger as you attack them, and then they can explode. Or you can just parry it with the soul shield and send it. Well, no, you then gain the fire ability. You gain their fire ability.
Certain enemies have purple attacks or attacks that show up in purple text.
Yeah.
And when that happens, if you do this soul shield, you get it as a consumable.
Right. And so you can hold on to that, or in this case, you're supposed to basically fling it right back at the enemy because it causes them to explode and do AoE on like whatever is around them. And so you can get these fun chain effects of like the satisfying parry, send back that fire that blows up the one fire guy, which blows up two other fire guys, and then you can, work your way down the chamber. Like those have knock-on effects for lots of different enemy types. It seems like, I don't know if every enemy is going to have a purple attack, but a lot of enemies are going to have purple attacks where they're going to want to put you in situations where you are altering between these two different parry mechanics so that you have different ways of doing a crowd control with enemies around you. And like I will say, it is like the parry window on this game is like really satisfying, I think, because it's pretty loose. We can get to like the Garland fight specifically requires you to use the parry to such an extent that if that window it's not Sekiro, right? Like it is pretty broad.
Yeah, it's really broad.
You still have to be within whatever frames it's allowing, but it's got a lot of wiggle room in a way that I found like satisfying. Like it made it to like you could have a fight start going wrong and like still like keep yourself in it. And for folks that maybe played a Sekiro and like found it too taxing, like I think that's like a totally valid way to respond to that game's like the windows it requires on the parry. Like this game has like a broader like kind of version of that, even if it's not as demanding moment to moment on the parry.
Yeah,
but
though
it seems
like
with its boss fights probably are going to, if it's going to trend in the direction of the boss fight here.
Well, the thing is too, I didn't feel necessary in the fights leading up to that fight. No. I guess like the Griffin that you fought was benefited by hitting that parry. But
I think that kind of like knocked it out for a second or something.
And so I get the really what I'm saying is it would be the thing that's nice about Sekiro is you will not get anywhere in Sekiro without believing and learning. I need to learn how to fucking parry. I have to
even
learn
basic
how to parry.
enemies.
Yeah. Whereas here it's like you could have gotten through that whole demo and never used that parry.
Yeah, I did it in the tutorial and was kind of like, I guess I'm all right. And then you get to the boss and it's like, but what if you weren't? And what if actually
there's no way to win that fight without. I can't imagine. It's not true. Of course, there is. You could dodge and chip away, but
I was gonna say that's what I did.
Did you?
Why?
It felt right. I don't know
I think you convinced yourself that I reject your hypothesis, Cado.
There were like, I was using the great sword and like it just felt like, oh, I know I can get 1 hit here when he does this attack, 2 hits here when he does this attack, and then I can dodge out of the way of the next one. Like I got into a rhythm with doing the like swipe, dodge, swipe, swipe, dodge, swipe. That felt actually very Sekiro like, where once you learn kind of certain patterns and like the tails on Garland are actually pretty long and like pretty specific to what he's gonna do, and so like that's how I got through that was absolutely specifically the first half. The second half is total bullshit that I got lucky on, but the first half was totally just like I had to learn what the tells were for specific things and dodge out of the way out of all of those attacks, because I did not remember that parrying was a thing apart from the soul shield, which I would use sometimes when he would do that. He has like a fire attack that he does.
Yeah, that was very easy to catch.
That's very easy to catch. Yeah.
The other half of that fight is that you have Lightbringer, which is an ability that you have no matter what class you have. I guess all of those types of active abilities carry from class to class, but the Lightbringer you start with, and the game does not tutorialize you well enough on it. I almost feel like they shouldn't even tell it to you until you get to like some sort of mid-boss fight, because where it is, where you learn it at the beginning of the game, it's like, or the demo, you're like, okay, I guess I can go into the super mode, but why would I do that?
There's no like these basic ass trolls don't require me being supercharged.
No, and so the Lightbringer, I mean, what it does is it spends 1 bar of MP. You end up with a bunch of bars of MP. Every time you use it, because it prevents you from your stamina bar being broken, which means you won't get knocked down, you won't get like stunned, and then 2, it increases the amount of stamina damage you do to an enemy when you attack them. So it's easy for you to overwhelm them, knock them down, and when you do that to them, they just blow up into red crystals. You don't even have to stop and hit circle on them.
And that part is satisfying. Like like when you would get into a fight and I would use like a twirl attack and like chain together like a good combo, and you had like 3 enemies on the ground stunned, and it's like circle, 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 boom, boom, boom. Like those are those little bits where like, okay, I can see the bones of
something decent here.
If I it is also true that like this team has done like, alphas, betas, however I don't know how they were like characterizing this. They're calling it a demo, like where they really are just kind of like taking stock and feedback. It is not what we've come to believe as like a betas and these demos, which is like here's the thing that comes when the game is more or less done. There aren't things to be changed. I don't know if the game's look is going to change all that dramatically, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if the next time we see it, the game has made some significant shifts in how things flow. But those two basic things, the parry and the crystals imploding, felt good. Yeah. And I was like, all right, there could be something here for them to build off of.
It's also worth noting another thing about Lightbringer, which I think answers a question that y'all had about me. So I maxed out Warrior, and I maxed out, or I got to the top level of Warrior, and I got to the top level of, I got into Black Mage. I didn't finish Black Mage, but I maxed Mage and went into Black Mage. Black Mage has Flare. When you are in Lightbringer, because you can't get stunned, you're able to do those long casts without being interrupted.
Even like
or
a
staggered.
regular
That's what
attack.
I'm saying. Yeah. So that's the thing, is like you'd ask me like, how did you figure out a way to get Flare off in that fight? And the answer is probably I was in Lightbringer mode, and so that took a huge chunk out of the boss's health or his stamina or whatever in that second form.
See, it was always the case for me where when he does the flame hit, and you parry that. Yeah. He is knocked to the ground for
you can just
half a second. He's on, he's on his knees, and then that's when I would turn on that mode.
Right.
That would give me the ability to. By the time I did that, I couldn't hit him, but it would put me in that mode. Then I would parry, attack once, and to the point where like I was getting him into crystal mode. I mean, he has 2 phases, but I was like getting through that in like at 90 seconds. That first phase
is nothing. Yeah, totally.
It is so satisfying.
And that's like
to
the
parry
Sekiro thing again. Yeah.
Right. Parry every one of those attacks.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
fucking.
like, I'm owning this fucking fight. You have nothing on me.
But then also, I would just get wrecked 30 seconds into phase 2 and be like, damn, bro, you got nothing on me. Like, boom, boom, boom. Phase 2. Ice sword. Whack. And I'm like, oh, well, let's do that first phase because that felt great. So let's just do that one again.
I just say, like, there's. Go ahead, Cado.
I was going to say, it's just very funny you brought up that flare thing because then I started trying that. And I hit that flare a solid like 6 attempts before I got my kill. But it was like I would hit it, he would have like, you know, the last 1/8 of his health or whatever, and just immediately own me because I would be like I never got the hang of doing physical damage in mage, and then like I would miss the next charge attack, or like it was always like some weird. I would do the panic like, oh, he's so low, I have to get these hits in, and then obviously get totally destroyed by a combo because I was not paying attention to what was happening.
I like the skill tree stuff a lot. I like how distinct you can. You know, the way that magic works is it you're like sitting there charging up better versions of the attack, but for the same MP expenditure. So you just do a quick fire blast, but like if you're able to hold it down until it's Faraga, you can do a big kind of more AoE version of it that does more damage. I remember clearing like 4 enemies with a single use of the water spell once, and I was like, oh, this class rules.
Did you get Dragoon?
I didn't get Dragoon because I didn't fuck with the spears really at all.
I unlocked it, and I actually that's what I ended up maining was Dragoon, and because the special ability for Dragoon is jump, which is you know that classic you get out of the way and then you fall down on the enemy. What's funny is that it has kind of 2 modes. There's one where it's like you come up and you come down and you don't move very much. And it's like only a split second, so it's like kind of like almost as if you had done a back step and then forward.
Right, sure.
But it does. But if you have if you have 1 MP, you can do that. If you have 2 MP, you can hold it, and you will travel a far distance towards whoever you're locked onto. What's not fun is hitting jump, thinking I have 2 MP when I'm really just under the 2nd MP.
Yeah.
But you know, this game is quick, so I'm not. I hadn't realized, I hadn't taken stock that the flare that I had just used, like, but I saw an attack coming in, and I thought I can dodge this by using the longer version where I stay in the air for longer, and it'll be fine. And then I go up, down, I'm right there. The second that he comes in with that grab attack that he does in the 2nd phase with the hand, which is easy to dodge. It's otherwise super easy to dodge, but I try to like fucking stunt on him and get completely owned.
Get owned. I don't know. Better than I thought it would be. I really don't like the look of many of the places in it, and we'll
so
see.
drab. I genuinely feel like I'm playing like an up-resed PS2 game at times, like not because it's like technically incompetent. It's just something about the look is just, it's just so featureless. Like it doesn't look like anything. So when I say it feels like playing a PS2 game, it does feel like I'm just going to some generic castle in some, you know, random, you know, and for you know, for dunking on Nomura as much as I do sometimes, like when you're gonna go, like, it's especially when you contrast it to like the art, like the concept art that someone like Yoshitaka Amano has done for that series, how like iconic that one game does look. I don't know if it needs to be pixel based. I just mean that there's such a broad range of aesthetics this game could have had, and it just settled on the one that is like, sure, does it feel maybe, I guess, thematically in line with the story of an angry man, which is the line Nomura's given out of like the story, like we don't know what that means. Like he said, like the names will make sense later. Jack will, you know, I mean, just like all the sort of things drive me when I've lost all the cutesy charm of the Kingdom Hearts and I'm like faced with like this version of Nomura, like I realize why his work often irritates me, even though I adored what he did in the remake, and he was a creative principle of. So like you live by the Nomura, die by the Nomura, I suppose. But in this case, I feel like it missed the mark, and there's enough here combat wise that I would hope that when we see it again, there's like kind of an overhaul, like top to bottom from that regard, because it's such a cool I like the idea of them revisiting those games from a different angle that isn't just, we're remaking Final Fantasy 1, because I don't know how much sense that would ultimately make other than doing the 2D remasters sort of things. But like, this is cool, especially because like I didn't play these games until Final Fantasy 6, basically.
Right.
Like, and that's a lot of people they jumped on the SNES. So I've never had a chance to go back to these worlds, and I don't know that I actually want to play Final Fantasy 1, but the idea of like playing in that,
you probably don't.
Right, exactly. But like, but I would like to go play in that universe and like have a reason to like read about the lore of that world and all that. So that's I think it's an interesting use of older like IP and franchises. So I remain interested, or at least think it's less of a disaster than I did when we saw the because the trailer made the combat look objectively boring and uninteresting. Like every part of it looked bad, and I don't feel that way anymore. So I'm curious to see it again, and like people should check it out if you're into these styles of game. There's enough different here combat wise to make it worth spending an hour or two with.
Yeah, totally. I do want to shout out a game that feels honestly like the opposite of that tonally, which is what I set up before. I guess I would say that it's like a roguelike. It's not really a roguelike though. It's an RPG with a lot of proc-gen built throughout it. It's called Wildermyth, Wildermyth. I played this in early access about 2 years ago. I want to say the end of 2019. Maybe it was even earlier than that, but I think it was 2019. And then I was like, this seems kind of cool. Let it hang and I'll come back to it. It is a tactical RPG. Battles are kind of tactics based, in which you are fighting monsters, doing your basic stuff. But at all points, the actions you're doing are end up leading to these kind of opportunities to further define your characters and your band of your kind of your party as you're pursuing the kind of main story goal that makes the game feel very much like yours. I guess like to just like get very specific about it. At the start of the game, you create 3 characters, and those characters have like some very fundamental traits where like, okay, there's a class associated with them. Either they're a hunter, a warrior, or a mystic. Your kind of basic, fighter, mage, rogue, or / ranger divide. But then they also have like a couple of adjectives describing what they're like. So you might have a character who is like a poetic romantic, or a character who is a greedy adventurer or whatever. And that changes how they talk in these kind of comic book panel by panel cutscene type things that happen. And so, your greedy person will be like on the lookout for treasure all the time. And then you get to these branching moments where you're choosing like, okay, there is a sick, weird creature that has a glowing blue orb somewhere inside of it. Do you reach in to take it? And when you do, or if you choose to do that, roll some dice. And if you succeed, then you get something cool. And if you fail, something happens. And the game is kind of knits together a story that ends up really feeling like it's your own story because of all of these proc-gen like elements. So like we started with, also I should say it plays, there is a multiplayer mode in which you can straight up say like, okay, you take one character, I'll take another character. Your party starts with 3. I think it can grow up to much more than that. I think we're at 5 now. I don't know if I can go to 6, but we started with like 3 very basic characters. And I'd say at the start, the character who had the least clear, vision for who they were was this kind of rangery character that we had named Lara, who was just kind of boring. Like we had our warrior who was kind of like a dramatic leader type, and she just wanted to make sure everyone was taken care of and everyone was safe. And we had this kind of bumbling but charming mage named Drimless. The game is a very fun random name generator. And Drimless was just kind of droopy, but like also like Mr. Magooing her way into cosmic relevance, which is very fun. The game is pretty well written. All these proc-gen events are like, basically, my understanding of the way this works is you'll have an event like you see a comet. Do you chase down where the comet landed? And that stuff is pre-written, but the way your characters are responding to them are also pre-written, but are tied to what their traits are. So when you see a character and you're a poetic romantic, you'll respond one way. But if you're a greedy romantic, your character will respond a different way, making all that stuff feel very, very different. The point is, Lara started as this kind of just like, I guess she has a bow. That's kind of all I know about her. I don't even remember what her starting like traits were. But now we're like 5 hours into the game and half of her face is covered with a strange like magical stone because of one of the encounters we had. This game has a very like, I really didn't like the visual style of the characters at first. It has a very like Sunday morning cartoon vibe, or not cartoon, a comic vibe, like the funny papers. But as characters develop and the armor that you equip on them changes, as like this character lost a leg in combat, and now just has like one, she had to go back to town to heal, and then when she came back, she had this kind of peg there to walk around on. Between that and her like weird half stone magic face, and the fact that she's become increasingly a loner. We had a whole event with her where she was like, I think I'm going to leave the party. I found this flyer for a different group of heroes, and we did this whole side event about going to meet that other group of heroes, learning that they're just a bunch of fucking bandits, and ending up like trying to fight them and kill them. And in that fight is where she lost the leg. It just didn't go well. And the mage had to kind of pull her out of the shit. It was like some really cool individualized character stuff, which if you've seen me play XCOM, you know, like this is, I already do a lot of this stuff in my own head when I play games like this. So to have a game that like does a lot of that by itself, produces these story opportunities where two of your characters will just be like, hey, one of the conversations my two characters had was my warrior said to this mage, like, you always just kind of, stuff just keeps lining up for you. What is going on? Like, we found that weird shrine, we found this, we found that. Why are you like naturally lucky? And the mage was like, let's find out. I'm going to walk in a direction and I bet we find treasure. I bet that that's true. And
also, had you had a weirdly lucky, like,
yes, this was true about this character. Yes, yeah. 100%. And that has to have been scripted because the mage character in this one story we're playing does seem true. But then we get to this thing where we're like, okay, we're going to walk in a direction. I bet we find something. At that point, you know, a percentage shows up on the screen. There's like a 48% chance that you'll find something or whatever. But we end up going and there's just like a nice little side conversation and side adventure about whether this person is like somehow blessed from the stars or not, and how the other characters in the party react to being around someone like that. And the game giving you that space for procedural characterization is really cool. You know, I had people recommend me this game again years ago, and I'd kind of bounced off of it again because it was early access, but also because it was just like, I thought the creature design was cool, but the character design just didn't do much for me. But now I'm like all the way in. I can't wait to get back to this campaign. We got through the first like arc of the campaign. We realize now that there are some evil Gorgons coming to try to take some shit over, and there's a big climactic fight at the end of that first arc, and you know, it's doing some really cool stuff. It seems like it's doing pretty well on Steam, so it's not like a game that I think no one's heard of, but I also just haven't heard many people in our circles talk about it. Again, it's called Wildermyth. Also, the abilities are just really cool. It gets around something that I struggle with in games. I have a lot of analysis paralysis where I want to make sure I'm making the ideal choice. When we stream XCOM, it's not such a big deal because I have to make a choice then and there, and it's easy for me to be like, well, this is our sniper, this is our pistolero, you know, whatever version of the sniper. But if I'm really playing a game like that, I end up like reading long guides about what ideal builds are, what different builds are, and then I make a build based on which one of the many builds that are viable are the one that's interesting to me. In this game, yes, there are classes, but when you level up, it's like Slay the Spire. You get three different options of new ability to give your character. And so you end up with this kind of like hodgepodge of like, oh, I wasn't going to make this person my like tank, a tank style warrior. I was going to do a DPS style warrior, like very heavy on damage, but I got a move that says she automatically goes into Overwatch if she moves twice in a row, which means she can rush to the front line and then like set up shop as in Overwatch as a tank. And like, okay, cool. That's not an ability I planned to give this character, but it came up as one of our options and it was so cool. I had to take it. The magic in this game is really cool. The mage doesn't just do spells. I mean, eventually our mage got her arm replaced with lightning. And so now she can shoot lightning out of her arm. But until then, that's not how magic works. Magic like pulls on the natural, auras of things and the natural capabilities of things in the world. So, if you're in a room with like a torch, you can infuse yourself with the torch and then use the torch's fire to do fire spells with around it, which is cool. Or if you infuse yourself with a log, you can turn it into a bunch of like splinter missiles. And that system is really, really cool. But again, you end up seeing like a thing will come up where it's like, oh, anyone who stands next to something that I've infused gets a bonus to hit. And like, that's not a thing I would have picked from a list of a skill tree or something. But when it comes up like that, it's like, okay, that's kind of in character for this person because of XYZ reason. Let's pick that one. And so I'm having a really good time with it. Again, it's called Wildermyth, and people should definitely check it out. It's something that like we should find an excuse to start a game, Rob, and stream, because I think it would actually be extremely fun for Tactical Tuesdays. I think that would be a good way of like showing off how you get to own the character and get like different story beats end up making you feel very close to the characters that you have in a way that most tactical RPGs, that's just like not the case. So also there's like a cool strategy map layer where you're like trying to get resources to do some crafting and deciding whether or not to send your people back home to heal or keep them out near the front, not the front line, because it's not a game about war, but it sort of does do the front line thing. Anyway, you should check it out for sure, Rob. Cado, I think you'd actually really like this a lot too. Yeah, so this seems very, very up both of your alleys.
It's been on my radar. I know that Sin Vega, who does a lot of writing over at Rock Paper Shotgun, and their whole brief is kind of like trying to find shit that's a little bit under the radar or a lot under the radar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that they've been very high on it, and it's been something that I've been keen to take a look at, especially because like tactical games with a good meta layer, I love them, but the meta layer is so hard to get right, and so few do.
This is a very simple meta layer too, which I think benefits it. You know, you are building. There are ways to build defenses on the map to prevent enemy incursions and stuff like that, but you're not. The stuff that's happening at the meta layer that is the most fun is still tied to your characters, and that keeps a degree of investment that I think is really good. So, I'll actually recommend Sin did a review over at PC Gamer that is really, really good, and I think sells the game better than I could. So, go read that review over on PC Gamer. Wildermyth. What else do we got? What else? Is anything else we want to shout out? I guess we did all those demos last week on Friday. We streamed a bunch. Trying to think now. I'm like blanking on the names.
Unsighted is the game I still keep thinking about. It was the last one we played on
Unsighted is very cool.
It's a very hyper light drifter esque action RPG that looks beautiful, plays really well, has for all the compliments I was throwing at Stranger of Paradise, I'm going to not look that up. I'm just going to roll with it. Parrying, like Unsighted, was like is better.
Unsighted's better. Yeah. Those parries feel great.
Parry is difficult to pull off in 2D games. There's a reason more of that tends to happen in like 3D action games specifically. And the parry in Unsighted is just, it feels, watching Austin discover a parry I didn't know you could do against a boss was so fucking cool. The short version is it's a game about, you're like a robot that wakes up in a lab. I don't know, humanity's fucked up or left, and like the surface is a disaster, and you need to, I don't know, go figure out what's going on. After a long war with the humans, the few androids that remain in Arcadia are running out of anima, the energy that gives all robots consciousness. That's a little more dire than the premise that I picked up on.
That's brutal.
Yeah. But that's also a cool as hell setup. And that demo is still available. It's supposed to come out later this year on PC and I think a Switch as well. Yeah, that's one of the cooler things that I have watching you play and having played myself. And people should go and tag that before the demos. Well, when this comes out, 20 seconds. So you could still, when this podcast comes out, you can still grab that before some of those disappear, because that next fest ends on the 22nd.
Did y'all?
I also just keep thinking about Norco, the other game you played.
Norco. Oh my God. Norco. Oh, I think I said this immediately. I was like, this is going to be my favorite game of the year it comes out, whenever that is, even if that's 7 years from now. Norco, people should go look it up. I think that demo is Next Fest done today. It'll be done the day this podcast
when this comes up. It'll
still be up. You're right.
Yeah, you will still have an opportunity to grab the demos for those games.
Yes. So go check those out. Norco is a sort of like, it's in the realm of something like Kentucky Route Zero. I'd say it feels more adventure gamey in the point and click sense. You're in a room, you're clicking on things.
There'd be actual puzzles in this game when it's maybe in that demo.
Well, I mean, we already hit the thing of like, well, what do we do here with this? What do we do with the statue of the Virgin Mary, where her face has a USB slot hidden behind it, for instance,
which is more puzzle than KRZ had across its entire.
Yeah, that's just not what KRZ was. This takes place in Norco, Louisiana, a area outside of New Orleans that is tied to a bunch of like oil refineries, drawing on the developer's own time spent there. The opening of the game is just this incredible narration of this person leaving this place to go into the kind of post-apocalyptic, dystopic West of North America, getting involved in some wild, dark cyberpunk shit, and then basically getting a call that's like, hey, you have to come home. Mom is sick. And by the time you get home, she's died. And the game is you returning home for this first time. And feeling like something is wrong. I mean, lots of things are wrong in this world. Very clearly, lots of things broadly are wrong. But you come home to try to like find, to reconnect with your brother who you'd left behind there. He's not around as far as you can find him. And you're trying to piece together what's happened in your absence in this place that you kind of fled for your own emotional health, though you again threw yourself immediately at some other wild shit. It's visually stunning. There's all of these incredible like pixel art scenes, but also this infusion of FMV throughout it, in really unique ways, that produce and like very pixelated postcard stamp, small videos in that classic Sega CD way.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean?
That whole game has the feel of an abandoned or forgotten Sega CD FMV.
Yes.
Like right under Sewer Shark was Norco. In Jeff Gersman's garage is a prototype of Norco that was just never finished.
Exactly.
He found it, he uploaded it to the Steam Next Fest, and we appreciate his archival services.
This is, I just think that it's written in a literary mode that is not particularly common in video games, which I said during the stream, and sometimes I think we can confuse that mode for quality in and of itself, when that stuff does show up. But I was pretty hit by this voice. I'm just gonna read this second screenshot on the Norco thing to help like sell this game. And I've read this dialogue before during that stream, but so if you watch that, you've already heard it. But I think that this is like the setup of the game. So the years carried you through overlit suburbs of the vast American limbo, across mountains above cell towers. Thumbing down 99, you saw an old man crouched in a roadside ditch. He was mouthing your name. He had a familiar gaze. He was gone when you wiped the sleep from your eyes. You spoke to Blake, learning of your mother's declining health, her insomnia, her erratic behavior. You ignored the urgency in your brother's voice. And like, that's the game it is, right? It's in that mode. And there are like little funny bits. Like it seems like it's taking itself seriously, but like there was also a lot of like, what the fuck is going on with this weird teddy bear? And so that should be on your list is what I will say. This is a game that seems immediately in conversation with a lot of touchstones and a lot of concerns and a lot of feelings that I think are Waypoint adjacent. Whether or not it actually will be my favorite game of the year that it comes out is who knows. But it feels like a very particular vision of a place that comes from familiarity with that place and the concerns that familiarity produces. So I really enjoyed that demo. People should check that out. I didn't finish it. I was like, I'm done. I don't want. I played enough.
I was with you.
Wait.
I watched what I watched, and I now the patience. Begins.
The patience begins.
Or what? Can you read with the?
Yeah, it says next to release date. It says hell is a place with patience. So,
which I think is both very funny and also extremely evocative of the game's mood. Cado, I know you were shouting something out before I mentioned Norco.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask about if either of you checked out the boss fight demo in Unsighted.
No. Are there more bosses in there?
There's one extra boss that's supposed to be deeper in, and they give you a couple of weapons and are like, this is what the combat will be like deeper into the game, just so you get a taste of what that's like. Do you remember did you finish that demo? Finish after the fact?
No,
I'm also gonna wait at this point.
All right.
Yeah, especially because that game is coming this year.
Right,
I was I played that boss. I got the ability to scale up walls. It was like, holy shit!
There's
great.
more.
I'm good.
Yeah, there's more to explore, but as far as story bits, you're basically done except for one outro thing that happens.
Okay.
Which since you didn't get there, I won't necessarily spoil. But there's a surprising. You remember how it was like, oh wow, this parry works on this boss. That's cool. That's it seems like that is gonna be the focus of bosses going forward, is you will need to parry in a way great. That cool. It is it I tried once to just dodge a boss, and it's oh, I cannot get a hit in. I'm not doing anything. I have to parry in order to find the opening here. And it also changed the boss's response. If I didn't parry, it would start throwing out more AoE moves.
Interesting.
But if I did keep parrying it was still doing it had a sword. And, it was really, really cool that it really if you could hit those parries, it really geez, what's the word I just lost?
Stun lock them?
No. I'm stuck on celebrated, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Gave you a thing, but that's good. Rewarded. Jesus Christ. It really rewarded you for hitting those parries. I don't know why I could not get the word rewarded out of my mouth.
Ever want to watch a person's brain melt in real time?
I've been there today. So
every time it happens, I'm like, I hope this isn't the sign of something neurologically wrong with me.
Yeah, I hope my brain isn't done. I hope my brain hasn't just decided.
Cado just wanted to play out the premise of that game in real time. It's he needs to go to the surface and find more
anime. Yeah.
Anime. I need to find more anime on the surface to.
Also another thing that happens when you beat that game is that you have to put in you put in a name, and then there's a leaderboard.
That's
with
interesting.
speedrun times that the devs put in, and one of them's a minute or some shit. And I'm like, what the fuck?
That sounds about when we discovered. But you
could sequence break the
we should at least mention this as a cool bit to go out on this game, which is because it was neat, was that the game opens in a lab, and that's also functions as the tutorial where you're gonna find a sword that lets you attack these bushes, that basic sort of shit that they're setting up for how the world is structured and laid out. And at the end of that is you find a desk, and there's a password on it, and that password lets you escape through an elevator, and the chase sequence occurs, and you're supposed to run over to that elevator. Well, Austin just happened to find the elevator, and I was just gonna mention him hey, keep an eye on that. You'll be back here. Remember the path to this location. And I was like, well, hey, just go to the elevator, see if you can punch in that password, because I know what it is off the top of my head because I had done that demo the night before. So puts in 1995, and the elevator works. And what I presumed what was going to happen was that like Austin was going to be stressed that he had just missed out on like sweeping through an area, and he was gonna
right.
And he was gonna immediately press the button and like let me go back down. Oh, that's cool that you could do that, but like let me go. Get whatever shit was down there, right?
Place. Yeah,
and immediately there's an error that says like the elevator like doesn't function, which would have made sense given what occurs, what is supposed to occur, would occur if you're following sort of like the breadcrumbs laid by the developers of a giant robot down there and like rampages through, and you wouldn't want to go down there. And so I was like, well, are you fucked? Because that's like where the weapon is. And as far as I knew, it was where the weapon was, like a sword, basic attack. And so Austin continued forth, meets a little robot pal that kind of becomes sort of your assistant buddy. And that character's like, hey, I found this. Like, you want this axe? and I was immediately then jealous because, yes, I did want that axe, but I got the sword instead. Good. And you don't get the sword or you don't get the axe if you run through the sequence normally. And so I thought that was is that just only something in the demo? But maybe not. If the game is building in for speedrunners, you could also imagine these are developers who are accounting for sequence breaks.
Absolutely. There's a speedrun timer built in that you can turn on and off in the options, and it feels, given that they have that screen at the end with both of their times in there, it feels like they're absolutely building towards that, which is neat. I always love seeing those types of like, is this technically a Metroidvania-ish? Even though it's a different perspective, like, do those still count?
Well, I don't know that there's all that. I feel like if you want to break down that genre more particularly, like it's often areas blocked off because I guess you're getting different moves. I don't know. It felt more in line with a more traditional kind of action game, but I don't know what the structure of that game will end up.
Just like
it wouldn't shock me
if
the
map and the way that the jump ability opened things up by gaining the ability. Kind of, I thought maybe it would go. But if
you leave that area and never come back, then I think that betrays one of the basic tenets of like that like specific.
Although I did definitely notice in that lab, there's a bit where if you have the jump, there's an area you can't get to.
Oh,
so if at some point you can go back down and that thing unclogs, then you can definitely jump up with that ability. So
yeah. Cool. Unsighted. Yeah. Seems good. Can't wait for that to drop. All right. Let's take a quick dip in the question bucket before we wrap up.
I'm also just gonna during this podcast, I'm just like doing a lot of heavy breathing because apparently EA is going to announce a Dead Space revival next month, and so that's that's exciting. Hello.
Well, we also missed an astonishing update from EA last week. Electronic Arts announced Madden NFL 22, featuring both Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, that's true.
So stop the presses. We're a week late on that, but like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, both in Madden on the cover.
Finally.
The GOAT and the Pretender.
Which is which?
Is this the first time they've done two people on the cover of Madden, or has that happened before? Because I always feel like it's one usually, right?
I think so. They started doing things where there's like different covers, right? So like I think they started like playing some edition games.
Sure.
There was that time they gave Brett Favre a valedictory retirement cover, and then he came back, and they're like, "Do you want a picture of Brett Favre on the Jets?" And everyone was like, "No," and they were like, "Well, here you go."
All right. Gaming at vice.com is the address. Use the subject question. This one I comes in from Jen, who says, "Hello gamers. Hi. I'm terrified of Metroid Dread. Not for any spooky reasons, but because the last Metroid game, 2017's Metroid Samus Returns, a game I know a lot of people enjoyed, but that I didn't like at all, so severely burned me that knowing at this point mythical Metroid Dread is being handled by the same team has me mortified. I'm trying to keep an open mind about this project, but I can't shake the nagging feeling that one of my favorite franchises of all time might end up with its most anticipated title ever being, for me, a total clunker. For context, if you need it, I've been a Metroid.
I do, because I didn't play this, but I do know that like lots of people I trust, and I love this genre, really resonated with that one. So I'm very curious to see how they bounced.
For context, if you need it, I've been a Metroid fan since I played Fusion and Zero Mission on my GBA, played Prime 1 and 3 to death, went back to Super and even the original Metroid 2, once I grew a better appreciation for older game design, found a lot to like in both. Samus Returns, however, really rubbed me the wrong way. The melee, parry, and free aim systems meant that a lot of the game was about running, stopping, waiting, shooting or parrying, and then running again, instead of the sort of desperate scurry that Samus had in the earlier 2D games. I found the new Aeon powers they introduced were largely pointless. The art style of the game was bland and forgettable, despite being technically well rendered. The fanservice-y bits felt a little too cloying, especially against all the changes they made to the original game. I could go on. I'm hopeful that Mercury Steam, being given an entirely original project, will give them the legroom to make something great, but the obvious continuity in game design, the trailer and the demos for Dread show leave me with a bitter taste in my mouth. And just for the record, I know I'm being a little melodramatic. That's part of the fun. Has there ever been an entry in a franchise that, when announced, fills you with that kind of existential dread? And when it came out, did it rise above your low expectations, or were you forced to watch in horror as one of your lifelong faves sank into the muck? Thanks, and keep up the good work.
Well, I haven't played Dread, but I do feel like maybe you should just be pivoting to Prime 4. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a radical departure, but that does. I can see where they're coming from. I can see where the movement and kind of the flow of room to room. They are moving Metroid, starting with that update, and with this one in a direction that is going to de-emphasize the parts that seem to kind of feel core. To this person.
I have an answer for this that I think is probably somewhat controversial, which is Skyrim.
All right.
I remember being like,
I don't think that's controversial now. I think it would have been controversial at the time. I think the Morrowind, see people irritated when Todd Howard saying you know what Starfield is? Skyrim in space. And a lot of people are getting but what about Morrowind in space? I feel like that's happened.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm overestimating it from my timeline.
Yeah, I think you follow a lot of Morrowind heads
maybe I'm just seeing Dia tweet too much about Morrowind, which there's a really good chance.
Oblivion had already sanded down a lot of systems from Morrowind, and I'd felt had made choices I understood. Like, for instance, it made it so that if your attack hit the enemy, it would always do damage instead, at least some damage, instead of it rolling dice behind the scenes to see if it was a hit and how much damage would be done. I understand that change, that partly comes with the graphical fidelity. There's a limit to how long you can make your open world 3D open world
real-time action game,
and then still treat it like it's a dungeon crawler, a tile-based, turn-based dungeon crawler, right? I get it. But Oblivion, Oblivion had started this move towards simplification. There were certain systems that were just only in DLC, etc. And so then to go from that, where there's still things that to me are core to what Elder Scrolls is, having this huge collection of skills and stats, choosing which ones you're specialized in, having some semblance of a starting class that it grows and changes as you play the game. But to wipe all of that away and just do these big skill trees, and that's it. And the skill trees are all tied to perks, and the perks are from the Fallout game. That's not even a thing that's in and it was just one of those things where I was they're going to sand this thing down to be as widely accessible, not accessible, because accessibility is a different thing, but they're going to make it approachable for a very wide audience by getting rid of a lot of the little things that I love to tinker with. There's no spell crafting in Skyrim. I loved going into the fucking School of Mages and cooking up a stupid spell that let me fly across half the map in Morrowind, or did some sort of ridiculous or enchant. I guess enchanting is still in Skyrim at least. But again, in the lead up, it was how is this ever going to be? They're getting rid of all of this stuff, all of the interesting like weird edges on this design and are instead making it a very straightforward action RPG. Skyrim's fine. So that's my takeaway at the end of this was, yeah, my low expectations were met. I have hundreds of hours probably in Skyrim across various platforms. It didn't ever give me the thing that Morrowind or Oblivion did. It never will again.
One could say, like, in the fullness of time, your misapprehensions were proven correct, as like Bethesda just began, like Fallout 4 happened, and then Fallout 76, where it's like the level of interest, even like their own legacy and their own style of games just began to diminish. And it's like, well, what do people like? They like crafting, right? Well, what if these games just become about crafting? No, not weird spells. Little hab trails for NPCs.
Yep. And I like some of that stuff. I like the craft. Like, in some ways, the way that crafting came back in Fallout 4 was like, oh, this is a weird, janky system that has been welded onto a side of a game. Now this is a Bethesda game to me.
Now that's Bethesda.
That's Bethesda. That's the stuff I like. They've reached too far and are doing stupid shit.
They should take another crack at Terminator.
They should take another crack at Terminator. I only played that game
people say they like that most recent Terminator game. Like I've seen, like folks saying like, hey, like don't put the bar too high, but like it's pretty good.
Sure,
sure. I'm not. And there's some next gen update that's coming out for it this summer, so it's been on my list of. Anyway.
Yeah. Weird. Any y'all, either of you or any of you have similar?
I've been looking. I've been trying to. I mean,
disappointments. Threads. Your own.
Well, I don't have like specifically similar experience of like seeing a thing, like feeling like it's coming at me. Like, all right, like I'm already worried off the bat. I remember Deus Ex, like the original, is one of my favorite games of all time.
Sure.
I was very psyched to see like Invisible War, where like the original Deus Ex comes out. I'm just a kid playing games on my computer. Invisible War is in development around the time where I'm starting to go to E3 and like went to like a meeting with like Harvey Smith to like see that game at like a private thing when I was like, where I would show up to PR desk and they go, who, huh? Like, we accepted a meeting with you? I'm like, yep, I'm here. My dad's gonna go over there. I'm gonna go into this. Can you show me your game? And I remember seeing Invisible War and being very excited for it. And I don't know that a game is more that's high on my list of like profound disappointments. But none of that registered prior to it coming out. But I was also young enough that I don't know if I even had like if I was to see it now, like if the same thing played out. I'm 36. But I felt that trepidation. I don't know what the discourse was around Invisible War because like it didn't exist in that way back then, and I wasn't tapped into it. But I remember finishing that game and being like, I don't think I liked any of that as I tried to convince myself of it during the course of playing it.
That's a rough one.
I think generally like what happens for me. So I definitely identify with the, oh no, a series did a thing that was a little bit different and it was really popular, but I didn't like it. And now I feel like I'm damned to like experience this forever. So like that is just getting old in games.
Yeah. That's everything in the world.
Yeah.
That's welcome to the MCU for me also.
Right. And the other part of that is, what you were describing, Austin, is an almost universal phenomenon where, like, when it comes time to think about, okay, well, how do we expand it? Mm-hmm. It is often sand away any points of friction that we know people had, but also with that goes a lot of the individuality that people like latched onto with a game, and so that becomes a really common phenomenon, and it just happens again and again. I think. For me, it's things getting resurrected and brought back. Like, I've lost track of where System Shock development is right now, but to an extent, I'm just like, maybe System Shock should just be in heaven now. Like, that last edition, like, it runs pretty well. You can have a pretty authentic System Shock experience. Yeah. Those games, like run well now on modern hardware.
I think that update is coming soonish. I think
that thing is listed as summer 2021,
and it is left cold. Like, talk about, hey, the screenshots look really good, but when I played that demo in real time, I was like, I don't know that I'm feeling this. And more to the point, I don't know what the point of that is. Increasingly, like a lot of the System Shock friction is still there, and so I'm like, I think I'd rather just go and kick it with System Shock. But yeah, so I think that for me is kind of the thing that happens over time is you see things you loved come around under new ownership. Like, Jagged Alliance. We talked about this the other week, but Jagged Alliance 2, all-timer, great tactics game. You will find no shortage of people in the game space like who have that in their personal Hall of Fame, top 10, like a religious experience.
Yeah.
Everything Jagged Alliance since then has basically been varying flavors of like hot garbage. And so every time there's a new, like, we're bringing Jagged Alliance back, it never ends well. And part of that is because the things that made Jagged Alliance 2 really compelling, you can't do. It feels like nobody feels they can do. They can't scope a game to be that way under modern like quality constraints. And you're also not allowed to make a game that's nearly this fussy anymore, unless you're like in the indie tactics space. Like, we're going to give you 40 action points a turn, and like everything consumes the little granular amounts of action points. And so every time it comes back, it's like watching a much lesser game wearing the skin of Jagged Alliance, and like you have that sort of revulsion of like, oh no, the Necromancer has done their foul work again. And that tends to be when I get this feeling of like, yeah, it's a brand that's brought back and I'm supposed to care about it because that brand did mean a lot to me, but it's not the same game. It's not the same team. There's nothing here except an IP. And yet, stupidly, on some level, I'm like, but I do like that IP. Maybe this time they'll bring the soul back when they reanimate the Flash. They won't.
They won't. It's fine. It's fine that they don't. And that's the larger thing. Like the thing with the Skyrim example for me was like, that was the last time I felt like that about a game, because since then my relationship with games has changed, and to some degree the lesson I learned was like, and it's fine. It's fine. It's fine if they don't make the games that I used to like. Did it sting that Anthem was not the BioWare game of old? Like, yes, but also a lot of the people who made those games are gone. Like, they're off doing other things.
We knew. We tried to. But
I don't even mean it was would it be a good game or not?
Right?
Because it could have been a good game and still made a lot of BioWare fans frustrated because it wasn't doing what Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Baldur's Gate, Jade Empire, KOTOR were doing in terms of Hero Game, Neverwinter Nights, games that like were about a certain type of play not being available. Anthem just isn't doing party-based stuff. It isn't doing, character building in the same way. It never did any of that stuff. It wasn't interested in that part of slowly unfolding a world and learning about it through interactions with side characters. And the thing like that, by the time.
Where are we at in Jade Empire? Where's is people like that game? Is it good? Is it shuffled under?
I don't think. I don't think
it doesn't have a strong cult. I don't think.
Yeah, I think there are people who have like vague fondness for it. I liked that game when it came out, and there were characters from it. Death's Hand was a cool like Vader-esque villain. I think that there's like some neat shit throughout that game. I don't know that hiring a bunch of Canadians to make a game about white Canadians to make a game about East Asian infused fantasy stories is the play in 2021. I don't think that game. I played that game when it first came out, and I don't think I left it feeling like it was like particularly egregious. But I was a baby, I was 19 or 20 or something when that game came out. Probably
in that era, I would have seen like the markers of cultural appropriation and been like, awesome.
Right. This is the thing. It's like that game came out when I was the height of it was 2005. So I was 20. That means I was, or about that. I was at the height of my like Legend of the Five Rings, fandom. And I was eating up anything that was like bathed in those touchstones and those in the light of that sort of content. So I was like, I'm all the way here for it. I really like these characters. I really love this little girl who's also has an evil demon inside of her, and that's cool, or I guess it was a demon that had I don't remember the exact detail with that character, but I don't know that we'll get it again. Like, I feel like, I guess I could imagine there being some sort of a remaster at some point, or a re-release.
I feel like that game will just keep getting pushed further back on the timeline.
There's just so many other things.
I don't know. Like, Austin, you're saying like you enjoyed it, but I also can't. I've never had a conversation with you where you've been like, you should dust off and check out. Like,
it's not that good. It's not that good mechanically. I don't think there's enough going on there that isn't the narrative, and the narrative has this touch of appropriation so heavily that it's hard to recommend. I wouldn't recommend it for the combat. The combat was interesting. It was an interesting experiment because it was like an action. It was like their first attempt to doing a more direct action game. Still tons of RPG elements, obviously, but like in terms of the way the combat worked, it was like a melee-focused action RPG. And so coming from KOTOR to that was like a big step. And then they obviously went from that to Mass Effect.
Speaking
I don't know which teams are working on what, but yes. Speaking of,
I'm probably the only person in the universe who feels this way. But Mass Effect 1, better combat than Mass Effect 2 and 3.
You're not the only person in the world who feels that way. A lot of those people have been out there.
Are they? I feel like I've never.
No, I think there's a strong contingent of people who are like, the game is better. I do know very few people who are like, the combat is better.
This is what I mean.
That is because that is a really out there position, Cado.
Well, the combat together with the like feeling of assigning points over like more like a larger variety of types of things in 1 versus 2, where it was like the same few combat powers that kind of spread across in different variations. Like,
I will say this. As they refined the combat in the later games, I did find it getting less interesting because it was like, yeah, wow, they're really converging on being a bog standard cover shooter.
Yes.
And it was like, good on you, I guess. But I guess that's a perfect example of like that phenomenon that Austin was describing at the top, where it's like, how do we make this just as appealing as possible? How do we wrap this in a comforting and familiar package? And in the mid-2000s, it was, you're going to fight these aliens, you're going to get into cover, and you're going to stop and pop. And as they got better at that, it still wasn't that great.
Right.
And so I was like, guess I got to clear another room in order to get to the next conversation with, with Morton or something.
I'm curious, kind of, what class did you play in Mass Effect 1? Because there are classes that are just straight up. Okay, that's surprising then, because.
Well, I felt like I spent a lot more time in the paused menu selecting
tactical abilities
from my people, and then me at the end, and then like you would shoot a little bit, but also you could kind of pause and aim yourself and then keep shooting, things like that were like, overall it was a much slower experience of the second 2 games, which leaned more actiony, and I just like really liked that. And also on top of that, and it liked the kind of fiddly like menu ability stuff, like that seemed to cover more things than just combat. Even like there was, I feel like there was like a charm stat in 1 that
it's the same stat, and it's the same.
Does 2? I felt like 2 took that out of putting abilities and ability points into it though. Like
it's still points. It's just it's the
Paragon, or
it's the Paragon, or it's the spec. I don't. Oh god, this is gonna kill me. Because I used to know this exactly.
Right.
Because there's an important change between 2 and 3 with that. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe there is. I'm not Googling this yet. I'm like now just looking at it in my own head. But the important change between 2 and 3 was that in 2, in order to get the high level interrupts or like the high level things, you needed to be dumping all the way into Paragon or all the way into Renegade.
Right.
Needed.
And that was 3, just like a thing you would do through conversation, right? Instead of like dropping points in. Like,
I think you're right that ME1 still had that. I mean, Mass Effect 1 was also just
there was like you had to reach a certain threshold in Paragon to be able to put charm points in. Was the thing in ME1?
Yes, correct. Yes, it unlocked ranks,
right?
In charm or in intimidate.
But you still had like the choice to whether you wanted to dump more points into that or like another ability or something, right? That little that, it wasn't that important, but the fact that I could do
it is if you wanted enough. Rex to live.
That's true. Which I did.
If you wanted Rex to live because of a reason that is fucked up.
Wait, hold on.
Anyway, the big change between
living?
No. Killing him in that situation, I'm saying that he's right is the thing. What I'm saying is he is right that we should have figured out a way to beat Saren despite him having a cure for the genophage. I think that's open and closed. I think we don't get to destroy the genophage cure because someone we don't like developed it. That's all. Yeah. Sorry, but it's open and shut for me.
Yeah.
And then it's not an option in that game. Mass Effect, the thing I was going to say about Mass Effect 2 to 3 is that in 3, you just have a reputation that then grows regardless of as long as you're doing big shit, you're getting reputation points. And so you get those good interrupts, whether they're Paragon or Renegade, instead of needing to like dump all the way in one and be like the perfect Boy Scout. You can still sometimes be like, you know what, nah, fuck this guy. And that still contributes to your overall, interrupt power or whatever. In any case, I do get what you're saying. I think 1 is also just more of an RPG in terms of gear.
Yeah.
That's the biggest change, I think, between Mass Effect 1 and 2. I mean, I guess the way the guns feel is probably the biggest change to your point.
Yeah,
but the fact that there are like 1,000 different sniper rifles in that game, 1,000, there's like 8 different types of assault rifle, and each of them goes from level 1 to level 11 or whatever.
They had stats. The weapons
they all had stats. Yes, totally. The thing that I'll say is the thing I like about the Mass Effect 2 and 3 system is the guns feel more distinct from model to model than I thought they would going into that. Because I was very much the person who was like, but I liked all the different guns. But like feeling the 2 different pistols in Mass Effect 2 can feel very different. Totally. Despite which I thought was like a good.
And it's like not that I think 2 was bad. I just liked 1 more.
Yeah, I know.
1 was more for me, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. But again, like what do we?
Yeah,
that impulse you had in many ways presaged Anthem, right?
Right.
The gravity of Anthem pulling them forward. Anyway, geez, we went longer on this question than I thought we would. So I'm just going to read this next one from Caleb and Shelley. Hey, Waypoint, love the podcast, and here is one to dunk into the bucket. So a slight backstory to this question has been debated intensely by my significant other and I. Allegedly, back during the time of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, his body was taken by train to his final resting spot, and he was guarded at all times, even late at night, by one person. Now imagine yourself as the guard and sole person guarding Lincoln's body in this train. Do you open his casket and touch his beard or corpse? Not to sway the debate with any of our talking points, but I am firmly in the camp of not touching the beard and corpse. But she takes the opposite stance.
Why?
Why?
How?
Why?
Is there more?
Here's a question for context. How famous was the beard at the time? Like, how much of a big deal?
I don't care.
I'm just curious. I already have my answer.
What's the most famous beard right now? What's the most famous beard? It's not Rob's. Rob's is very good. What's the most famous beard or hair right now in the world? I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
Let's say
James Harden's beard is probably the most famous beard.
James Harden's beard, great beard. It's a great beard. It's a very limited. We already opened this talking about the NBA. I feel like we're just in our NBA shit right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's someone's body.
Yeah.
And
that's also someone's family member whose body it is.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I would feel a strong drive to not fuck with the body.
I would not want to fuck with the body.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a certain, what I was trying to get at there was like, it feels like a certain amount of this is kind of couched in like, what if you went back in time and when you like, I can kind of see the through line of like being a person out of time thinking this is not going to do anything or be weird or something like that.
That's not the question though.
What do you get from it?
Oh, want to hear something way more fucked up?
I don't know.
I got something that's like just way worse, but also cool. I don't know. Here's the part that we know is true. When Horatio Nelson was killed at the Battle of Trafalgar, remember that's like lower latitudes. It's hot. The body's not going to keep real well, but he has to come home in lion state. So he's transported home in a giant barrel of, I think, sherry. He is preserved basically in alcohol.
I don't know.
I don't like where
Rob,
this is going.
You can just stop.
The thing is, what do we know about sailors, British sailors in the 1800s? They're thirsty. They love the booze.
Oh
no! I hate.
And so the word is,
no.
On the trip back to England, sailors aboard the ship would help themselves to a drop of Nelson's blood by sticking little straws through the slats.
This is worse. It's getting worse. Stop.
And having a little sip. And it's
I'd rather
immortalized
fucking
in a sea shanty, a drop of Nelson's blood. And I don't, like, here's the thing. I don't know if they actually did this or this is just a story because, like, we do know he was transported home in like alcohol.
Right, sure.
The question is, I don't know, like, the story is sailors got thirsty and started like having a little nip of the alcohol on the trip home. But I don't know if that's just a shit story that, like, you know, came after the fact where, like, you know, what'd be fucked up is having a little sip of that, like, preserved like Nelson booze. But at the same time, could have happened.
Everyone's just trying to take a sip of that cursed sarcophagus goo.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing for me is, I just elaborate the what do you get out of it thing? Is it that you get to say you did it? That you touched Abraham Lincoln's
Would you tell anyone?
You can't tell anyone.
The kind of person that's doing that is.
If you were like, I went back in time and had a really cool dinner, I'd be like, oh, that sounds sick. What was it like? Talk to me about what I saw a show. Okay, cool. What was that like? Was the dialect like understandable to you in a meaningful way? What was like I touched a dead man's beard. Like, I don't care.
No,
that's
not
weird
a dead
thing.
man's beard.
No, you wouldn't be he's saying Abraham fucking Lincoln.
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck if you touched anybody's beard.
Austin, you are so off base.
Somebody touches the beard and then pretends, you know, I met Abraham Lincoln and let me touch his beard. And
if you went back in time and talked to Abraham Lincoln, maybe I care. I don't give a fuck about any of this shit.
Austin, no one is questioning whether you care. That's not.
But what's impressive about it?
The kind of person that's going to do that is going to tell you that they touched Abraham Lincoln's beard. They're not going to be like,
what's the effect they expect it to have on me?
Then they're not going to tell you. They're going to be like, I'm not telling Austin that shit because he's not into that.
But who is into it? The people who are into it, explain to me the taste. Explain to me the thing, the joy. Give me some semblance.
I think it's
I'm just saying
a proximity
there are a lot of people that would do it.
Yeah, it's a proximity to a famous thing, right?
Yeah.
Bullshit. Stupid.
Have you watched YouTube?
Have I watched YouTube?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's not a hard, jump to, like, seeing you know.
But, like, the thing that you have to do is, it's not just proximity to a famous person. It's also what Rob said. It's a dead person who has a family. Right. You have to cross a misdeed to achieve this.
Transgressive.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way,
what is more distinct? Okay, here's the other thing. If you could be like, I went back in time and guarded Abraham Lincoln's body, after it was killed.
That's all you gotta do.
Why is that not enough for you? Why do you then also have to touch his beard?
I don't want to do this.
I gotta know. I gotta know what the difference is. I gotta know why it wasn't enough for you to be like, the person who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, I defended his body. And also we can get into Lincoln. I'm not a Lincoln stan. We know this. But there wasn't enough for you to guard his body at night. You had to open his casket and take a little hair for yourself? Nah. Bad.
Wait, take the hair?
Badly done. You're getting some hair follicles on you. If you're touching a dead person's beard.
When you say take the hair, that sounds like you're like putting it in your pocket and changing the time continuum.
Why is that different at that point? Why is that's too far suddenly? You open the casket, that's allowed. But taking the hair, that's a step too far.
That does feel. Yeah, I can see that being a line for.
That's all I'm saying. Where is the line? Where is the line?
I think taking the hair is. I could see even the gross person who's touching the beard is also not going to take the hair.
Why? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they bring it back to prove it to me?
So okay, actually,
your cynicism knows
that
no
person
bounds.
would definitely take the hair.
They're definitely taking the hair.
This is a well-known.
Of course they would take the hair.
The sheer number of times historically famous people have like people have like surfaced with like locks of their hair after they were gone, scraps of their clothing. This is like well-known thing. Definitely people are gonna do
the reason we joke about drinking the sarcophagus goop is because people fucking dug up the sarcophagus. They couldn't leave it down there.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers have to learn how to leave well enough alone with dead people.
Rob's story proves
He already
the point.
died. Let him be dead. I have strong feelings about this, I've discovered. I did not know I had strong feelings about this. But apparently I do. What did Rob mean, asks Alec, when he said, "Don't give into astonishment" was canceled at the end of the E3 podcast?
Well,
Don't Give Into Astonishment was streaming, and it was playing competitive game. No, what I mean is the show. We have not done that podcast.
We have not yet.
In a minute.
It's
true.
It's been a while.
It's true.
However, all things are possible. Who knows?
Who knows? It's on the list.
Point, very soon, we're going to be discussing what things exactly are possible, and we will know. But yeah.
WaypointPlus.com is the address to go subscribe to Waypoint Plus, and perhaps one day soon listen to us talk about some waypoints of ours. You can follow us twitter.com/waypoint, waypointadvice.com. What's going on the site this week? Any we're just in that post E3 haze, but I'm sure something's going up.
Yeah. I will see.
You should be less confident. I checked our editorial calendar today, and I was like, "Oh, that's right. I got really tired." So stuff's gonna happen. There's gonna be good blogs. There's gonna be fun posts. But in terms of stuff I know to anticipate,
I don't know if I'll finish it today. It'll probably get finished tomorrow. But I did a bunch of reporting on. I always wanted to write about the CRT Pixels account, Twitter account that completely blew my mind the first time I saw it. A year or whatever ago. Basically, the premise of the account is showing how art for games in the 8-bit, 16-bit era were drawn in a specific way, knowing that they would go through a cathode ray tube television, and thus the way they were specifically drawn was knowing that it would change and add detail because of the way that technology worked. And so we have since then internalized what's actually great is the raw sprite work, and it is great, but it is not how you were meant to see them. And so the reason I finally got around to wanting to write about it was because Square announced these pixel remasters that they're doing for Final Fantasy, I believe 1 through 6. We haven't seen a lot of them, but and also it not coming to console is probably just a separate announcement down the line. But the moment you see Square, old JRPG, touching the art and mobile, immediately gets a lot of people rankled. But there were folks like Chris Kohler, who'd been at Wired and Kotaku and is now at, I think, at Digital Eclipse, Jeremy Parrish, who was at where is he at now? Limited Run Games. But folks who spent a lot of time thinking about topics like this. Anyway, they were pointing out, it does seem like Square is maybe trying to revisit this art and internalize. Square hasn't said this publicly, but what it appears they're trying to do is kind of square that circle a little bit and hey, we're going to modify the art to get closer to what would have been the intent of the artist if they knew they were designing this pixel art to be looked at cleanly on high definition screens and not through a CRT. So anyway, that's all to set up me talking to a bunch of folks about that and pixel artists about what it means. So a big feature about that account to talk more broadly about CRTs and sprites and pixels. So that should be up sometime later this week.
Cool. So we'll also probably do some streams this week. Nothing set in stone quite yet, but got the itch.
We'll have schedules and stuff, that stuff soon. We ran so close to the sun to get this off the ground, then do E3. The second half of June is a lot of exhaling, getting a project code internally to even do expenses related to Waypoint Plus. And we will get into a place where you'll be able to expect things, more than putting out a tweet 10 minutes before it happens.
Sounds good to me. Follow me on Twitter at Austin_Walker, and follow Rob at
Rob Zachney.
Yeah, there it is. Patrick
at Patrick Klepek.
And Cado
at _Cado_appears.
As always, thank you to Bowen for letting us use the track Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. We'll be back later this week with Rob.
I just finished the outro, but then I have a question. It's for people. It's for the audience.
That's the outro.
Okay.
We're done. We said all the stuff we have to say. What's the question?
So, didn't get enough on the pod, but my thirst for tactics has been mighty, and I've heard Phoenix Point got a lot better since its release. A lot of updates have come out. I've started playing it, and I find that many of my initial objections to it feel like they remain in effect. One can only gun down so many forms of stupid crab before one begins to feel like this is not quite scratching the cutthroat tactics itch you were hoping. I do like that it has a functional meta layer. It has that OG XCOM feel of you got people racing everywhere. That's cool. I enjoy that. But the thing is, I now need to know from people who maybe put a little more time into this game, is it worth continuing this journey in 2021 where Phoenix Point is at right now? Or is it giant enemy crabs all the way down? Because if it's the latter, I would love to just be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to save myself the remaining 30 hours or so of this journey. But if someone has a case to make for hey, Phoenix Point got really good. The Gauntlet magic is back. I'm open to it. I want to believe.
You want to believe. You need to know.
I need to know.
Yeah. Let Rob know at Rob Zachney on Twitter. Send us questions, gaming@vice.com. I heard that there was that 2D Souls-like is getting an update that's supposed to make it a refresh, and I can't remember which one it was called.
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. I saw a recent era thread on it. It was but that looks kind of interesting. I think it's coming out on Switch sometime this year. I think we're talking about the same one.
Is it Death's Gambit?
Yes.
I want to say it's no. Yes. Is it Death's Gambit?
I think it's Death's Gambit. I think that's the one I was thinking about. Let me look.
This is we're really turning this into a classic.
No, that's not it.
It's
Death's
not
Gambit.
it.
It's not the one I was thinking of.
What's the one?
I don't know.
Death's Gambit is not the one I was thinking of either. Fuck, what's it called? I can't find it. I'm clicking on all the 2D Souls-likes I can find on Steam and scrolling down to more like this, and it's not showing up in any of them.
It's not Titan Souls, right?
No, it's not Titan Souls. It's not Blasphemous, because Blasphemous I know is good. I just haven't played it yet.
We gotta stop. We'll come back on Thursday.
I want to go on the record.
We're
gonna keep this podcast going. I want to go on the record. This Blue Box Studios bullshit is not a Kojima Silent Hill thing. It's just not. That's my bet.
Some people? Some
There's an article on the site.
Acted irresponsible.
Yes.
In inflaming.
Yes.
This
people needed a fucking...
No, we're not going to unpack it. We're not going to do it. No.
Okay.
No.
Just stupid. There's an article on the site. Galt wrote up the people who believe that this indie studio is secretly making a Hideo Kojima game. People think a Hideo Kojima new Silent Hill game is hiding in plain sight. It's on the site. Go look it up. Waypoint.vice.com. But I just needed to get on the record. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll take the L. But
it'd be cool if you were wrong. I would be delighted if you had to eat that.
Would love it.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Don't think
I think it would be stupid. I actually think it would be really stupid because I think it would set a really bad precedent for what...
You think this furthers the work the Snyder Cut began?
Yes.
Of
in some ways, yes. Or continued. The Snyder Cut continued that work from the Mass Effect 3 ending, from a lot of just fandom. Anyway, I'm gonna end this podcast now. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Think how different this podcast would have been if I followed my instinct last night to have a Waypoint After Dark where we talked about basketball.
Yeah,
this would have been a tight podcast.
Tight, easy. We just wouldn't.
I was hiding from a tornado. I might be sleepy and
hungover though. That's the problem.
I ordered a sandwich 20 minutes ago, so that should be here soon. I'm excited.
Nice.
You should have seen what I cooked this weekend.
Oh, I wish I could have. Rob.
I really nailed it.
Nice.
All right. That's doing it. We're done. Fuck capitalism. Go home. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Bye. Peace. Goodbye. I'm leaving.
They left.